Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today, well, one, you may be able to hear somebody is mowing their lawn outside my window, but you know, that's what happens in the summer. But also, I'm in front of my bookcases again. I just recently got this setup back because I had to move my bookcases so I could paint this room, and then it just took me a really long time to put them back, and now I finally have them back in this little corner and I'm very excited to be filming here again. I do have a little bookshelf organization vlog if you want to watch that, which I'll link down below, but that's not what we're talking about today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about my reading habits because I've been thinking about these a lot recently, and I don't know, I thought it might be interesting to talk to you guys a little bit about them because I've been reflecting on my reading habits recently because I noticed that in the last few months, maybe like March through June-ish, I haven't really been loving what I've been reading, and I wanted to try and figure out like why that is because that's not fun for me if I'm not enjoying what I'm reading, and also that makes it really hard for me to do reviews and give recommendations to you guys if I haven't been liking what I'm reading, if I don't have new stuff to recommend because I'm not excited about it. A lot of the stuff I've been reading has been in the like 3 to 3.5 range, which isn't terrible. Like, I don't hate those books, but it's also not great. I'm not enthusiastic about them. Usually for me, in order to be like, yes, I recommend this book, I would want to have rated it at least like 4 stars and up. So I've been reflecting on my reading habits and how they have changed, especially over the last couple of years because I have been making videos for a little over a year and a half now, I think. And so my reading habits have definitely changed since watching BookTube, since being a part of BookTube, and some of that has been for good and some of that has been for not so good. I definitely read more now because of BookTube, and I also have found some really amazing books because of it. But as I said, just in these last like few months or like the first half of the year, I just haven't really been liking what I've been reading, and I'm trying to figure out, is that because like, am I a super harsh rater on books, which I don't think is true, or am I just really bad at picking books for myself to read, which in previous years has not been a problem. So I've come up with a couple of things that I think have changed in my reading, and some of them are on purpose and some of them are not on purpose. But I'm going to talk a little bit about them. So the first thing is something that I actually have done on purpose, but I think maybe I need to reevaluate and like rebalance how I'm doing this. So the first thing is reading outside my genre. So usually I consider my genre, my comfort zone, my happy place in reading to be high fantasy. A lot of times specifically adult high fantasy, but I will read other age ranges also, but high fantasy has really always been my thing. And it's only more recently that I have started expanding outside of that, and that's something that I've been trying to do on purpose because I want to find new books. I want to try new genres. I want to see what other kinds of books I like or I could like. And that is something that I have found some really great books because of that. I would never read even like low fantasy, or what I sometimes call like contemporary fantasy. Never really read those before, and now I have tried quite a few of them and found some really good ones. But in the case of finding these books that I have loved that are in genres or subgenres that are outside my comfort zone, those are the books that are the anomalies for me, because in general what I like is high fantasy, very often adult high fantasy, and so I have found some books, of course, that are great that are not adult high fantasy, especially something like The Raven Cycle, which is a low fantasy or contemporary fantasy YA, is now one of my favorite series, and I wouldn't have found that if I hadn't, you know, pushed myself to read outside what I consider my genre. So I'm really glad that I have done that. but a lot of the books that I've been reading have been outside of what I consider like my genre and outside my comfort zone. And I think that really for me, I just need to like rebalance how I am picking my books. So I'm not going to stop reading outside of high fantasy. I'm not going to stop reading contemporary fantasy or low fantasy or the occasional YA contemporary or contemporary romance, or, you know, whatever other genres or subgenres are, you know, outside my comfort zone. But I do think that maybe I need to scale back a little bit and be more selective with those and make sure that I'm also still reading plenty of high fantasy books that I'm very excited about. Now, the other thing that I've noticed about my reading that I think has changed, especially in like the first half of this year, was that I kind of fell into this habit of trying to see how many books I could possibly read in a month, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it kind of then pushed me into like selecting books or into certain reading habits that meant I was picking books that I just like wasn't as excited about. I wasn't necessarily reading books that I didn't want to read, but it was like the difference between books that I was like, this is interesting enough, I'll give it a try, versus ones I'm like, this sounds amazing and just my kind of thing and I'm super excited about it. And I had been focusing a lot more on those like, maybe kind of books, because a lot of times they were books that were quicker and shorter and, you know, just easier reads, because a lot of the books that I tend to really love are very often longer and denser because they are high fantasy. And so I think I've been focusing a lot on these really quick, fast books. And again, not to say that there's anything wrong with quick, fast books. Part of it is just like a personal preference. I noticed that a lot of my main complaints when I was reviewing these books were that I felt like things weren't developed enough, that the author didn't give themselves enough time or enough space in the book to really dive into whether it was development of the characters or the world, or if there was magic, then the magic system or the plot or whatever it was. I was wanting something that was longer and went more in depth. Now, again, not to say that all short books are underdeveloped and all long books are just like amazingly developed, because there are some short books that are able to do their story so perfectly and so concisely, and then there are some long books that are just 600 pages of nonsense. But overall, I think there's a consistency in the complaints that I was having with those books, and then what I realized I enjoy about longer books, that I enjoy having a lot of time with a single book and a lot of time to immerse myself in this world and really get invested in these characters. So this is all to say that I just kind of have to readjust my own thinking and be more aware of when I am slipping into these habits of trying to push myself to see how many books I can possibly read, instead of focusing on reading books that I'm really excited about. Now, if I do refocus like this and focus more on reading these adult high fantasy books, or just high fantasy books in general, and letting myself read these longer, thicker, denser books that may take me longer to read, I may end up reading fewer books in a month, and I have to just remind myself that that's okay, because I don't need to be reading like 1,000,000 books in a month. So I also have been thinking that I may kind of mentally just put a cap on the number of books that I plan to read each month, because a lot of times, instead of doodling, what I'll do is I'll write out lists of books, and I'll write out these long lists of books that I want to read, and the goal being to see how many I can possibly read and how many I can push myself to read. But I want to kind of mentally put a cap on at least my planning for the number of books that I'm going to read. If I happen to read like a lot of books in a month, I'm not going to like stop myself, but I'm gonna try and keep myself from over planning because that is part of what pushes me, like me pushing myself to read more, because I'm over planning the number of books that I want to read in a month. So I think I'm gonna try and cap it around like 8 books. When I was thinking back to last year's reading and how many books I tended to read in a month, I think it was usually between like 4 to 8. So I'm going to say around 6 was my average reading that was comfortable for me, that I didn't have to push myself too hard, and I was really enjoying the books that I was reading. And so that's why I think in terms of my planning, when I am planning out which books I'm going to read, I want to cap it at like 8. And then if I happen to read more than that, I'm not going to stop myself, but I don't want to try and push myself past that. Mentally, I'm going to be expecting to read around 6 books in a month. So that is one difference that you may notice in the future, that I may be reading slightly fewer books, but still, like, 6 books is still like is a decent number to me. I think that's a good number of books to be talking about in a wrap-up. Last month I had to talk about 13 books in my wrap-up, and it was kind of overwhelming and exhausting. So also, reading fewer books might make my wrap-ups more manageable to film, and also less ridiculously long to watch. So that, you know, that may also be a good thing. Also, I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make to you guys, but you may notice there may be a difference in the types of books that I'm reading, because I am going to be trying to focus more on high fantasy, adult high fantasy, longer books, all of that kind of stuff. But I'm also hoping that you'll be able to see more recommendation videos and more book review videos from me, because I will hopefully be reading things that I am more excited about, or at least have stronger opinions about. So that will be exciting too. And one last thing that I have been thinking about to kind of help myself be more excited about my reading is that I also want to get better at DNFing books. I started like at the end of June and then in July trying to allow myself to DNF books, because I've always been very bad at it. I always have been one of those people that is like, once I start a book, I have to see it through to the end. But that's not fun, and a lot of times, you know, it just slows down my reading and makes it less enjoyable for me. And a lot of times those books, like, I don't have anything that I really want to say about them beyond that I didn't like them. So there isn't really a point to me forcing myself through it. So I'm gonna try and get better at DNFing books. So that is just something else that you may notice. I am probably going to include in my wrap-ups which books I have DNF'd, and I'm planning, I think that every season I'll do like a DNF wrap-up where I'll talk about what books I DNF'd that season and why I DNF'd them. So those are some small changes that you may notice in my videos, in my reading, but hopefully this is going to make this just a lot better for all of us. It'll be more fun for me. Hopefully it'll be more fun for you guys, because I'll be more excited about the books that I'm talking about, and hopefully I'll be able to do more recommendations and reviews and all of that. So that is all for this video. Thanks for listening to me ramble about my reading habits. I hope this was interesting. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.